In June this year, I joined the bark Europa for part of her annual voyage back from the Antarctic to Europe. I joined at Horta in the Azores and 2 weeks later disembarked at Rouen in France. Arriving to join the ship at 5 p.m, we were off by 7 p.m. to take advantage of favourable winds. Europa, although having powerful auxiliary engines, is famous for sailing at every opportunity, and we literally sailed away from the quay and out into the Atlantic, backing the foresails to push the bow away from the quay and then sailing out of the harbour. That is Jelte, the first mate from Holland, and there's Sophie, the second mate from France with her head out of the wheelhouse. The permanent crew was 9 women and 6 men, led by this gentleman, Klaus, the captain, who looked like an old sea dog. We were the voyage crew, 43 paying guests, making a total of 58 on board from 16 nationalities. And when we all crowded in the deck house, as we were on for someone's birthday, it was a bit of a squeeze. It's a Dutch ship and had a gentle, informal feel and wonderful food. The captain had a dog, Sirius, who wandered anywhere on deck, although he's getting a bit old now and finds the companion steps quite difficult. It was gentle sailing out of the Azores as we headed out into mid-Atlantic and then took a broad sweep clockwise to come into the English Channel. As no powered ships go that way anymore, we didn't see another vessel for 8 days. 4 days out and a weather front came through, and we had great sailing in a force 6, ticking along at 7 to 8 knots in clear weather in a northwesterly wind with 2 to 3 metre swells, covering about 150 miles a day. We were divided into 3 watches, so basically 4 hours on and 8 hours off, and on each watch each person had to do half an hour on lookout on the foredeck and a quarter of an hour of helming, plus helping with any sail handling or maintenance that was going on. When the front came over, it hit us with gale force 8 gusts, and the captain took over the steering and ran us directly downwind, while the crew took off the royal and topgallant sails and the mizzen topsail. I unfortunately missed some of the excitement, having avoided seasickness by judicious use of seasickness tablets and congratulating myself on not being sick. I and 10 others were suddenly hit by food poisoning, probably from some bad salmon. Disappointing, because it wiped me out for a bit over 24 hours. Only the permanent crew went aloft to stow the skysails, royals and topgallants. And getting the tacks of the big foresail and mainsail sweated in took some proper muscle. I was really impressed by the female crew doing all and everything on running the ship, but there were times when nothing was needed except brute force, and the blokes were very handy for that. Quite early in the trip we saw dolphins, and everyone rushed to the bow to see. They came playing around the bow, and often the very first to notice was Sirius the dog, who started barking. I presume that's because he could hear their high-pitched noise, which we can't hear. We did see a few whales as well, but not very close, although apparently we nearly ran over one in the early hours, but I wasn't on deck at that time. But they were quite common, these dolphins, and by the middle of the trip, the shout of "dolphins" barely raised a flicker. Part of the fascination of big sailing ships for me is working up in the rigging. From my earliest reading about the grain races from Australia to Britain in the 1920s, it was the images of working aloft with the sea stretching all around you that attracted me. And there was the crew on Europa swinging around aloft. I couldn't wait to join them. The easiest was the bowsprit. Just hop over the foredeck rail and out on the netting, clipping onto the safety wire. And from the very end, the whole beautiful ship to view in full sail on a blue sea.
Have you told any of
Yes,
the crew?
yeah, I've cleared it with the captain. Oh, no, not the captain, who's on first mate.
First mate.
Yes. Just got to get up here, huh? Oof.
Climbing the mast was a different proposition. I've speeded it up here because it usually took half an hour to get up, out along a yard and back again. This was not frolicking in the rigging. The 67-year-old me was not the same as the 27-year-old. Then leaning backwards on the futtock shrouds to get into the top, level with the main yard. Onto the topmast shrouds. And into the cross trees. And on up the shrouds to the top gallant. Then stepping out onto the foot rope and out along the top gallant yard arm. You get a pretty good view from up here. And then back down again. I went higher up the foremast, going up to the royal. You climb to the top of the shrouds and then step onto a ladder that runs vertically up the back of the topmast. I got to the top and reached over and clipped on to the royal yard, and then looked at stepping onto that foot rope there. I thought, I can step onto that foot rope, but I'm not so sure I can get back off it again. So I called it a day. So much for running around in the rigging. For every bit of sail handling, all the lines used are taken off their pins. And at the end of a manoeuvre, Braces, halyards, clewlines, buntlines and sheets could all have been used, and everything is on deck and needs to be coiled up and put back on its pins. Although I knew all the sail names and most of the rope names, I was very disappointed that by the end of the fortnight I still couldn't remember where all the ropes were actually cleated. I did go up aloft on several occasions, and here's proof. That is me. And I was even useful at sometimes. We had to put a new topsail on. I had a complete new set of sails, and they started to put this on when we were in anchor off the Isle of Wight before going across channel into Rouen. So this was hoisted up and stretched out along the yard, and then the actual sail had to be tied on by these ropes called row bands, and that's me up aloft helping to lash the sail to the jackstay. Because she's a real sailor, Europa also has stunsails, which are these additional sails put out alongside or the mainsails in light winds. They are actually a real faff putting them up, and really quite tricky to handle, as you can see here as this one is taken down. But it's all part of what you've got to use if you're going to sail just by wind alone. There were 3 scientists on board doing research. One tracking the distribution of plastic nurdles, that's pellets, which were drifting from a spill in South Africa onto the remote Atlantic islands. And 2 students taking trawls every day. One measuring the plastic in the water a metre below the surface, and the other was scraping the top of the sea where all the plankton lives. This is the trawl being set up. Plankton is the collective word used to describe all forms of drifting and weakly swimming life in the sea. So when we open the dredge, this sludge of animals appears.
Yeah.
You're feeling brave and you're going to touch it without your gloves, are you?
Yeah, well, I know what
Because
I'm
you know what
touching.
you're doing.
You put,
can we
oh,
put
you
that
got a
one
bubble
in
raft shell. Can you get the tweet? Yeah, yeah.
Whoa, that's a big one.
What is that?
This is a closer catch. My yeah.
Oh, I grabbed it.
So this is and I don't want to touch it because it's been stung. This is a bubble raft snail. So
This one is luminous at night. And these are baby swordfish. And the collective name is salps for all these. So we had to wait for the wind and tide, anchoring in the lee of the Isle of Wight before going across the channel and up the River Seine to Rouen. This video will be too long if I follow us up the river till we joined the Rouen Armada with all its tall ships. So I'll end with this clip of us on our best days sailing. We're 9 days out in good breeze. We're doing 7 to 8 knots, covering 180 miles in the day. This was sailing at its glorious best, and it was a thoroughly good 2 weeks. maybe next year I'll be able to give you a demo of square rig ship handling when my radio controlled model of HMS Surprise is finally finished. Thank you and good night.